welcome to another unboxing video from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander, and today we're taking a look at Pendragon, the Fall of Roman Britain. And this is, if we look on the side here, Volume 8 of the Coin series, which is Counterinsurgency for those who are uninitiated. This is put out by GMT Games, and it's designed by Marc Guyon-Rittay. This is a big 3-inch war game, and we'll take a little look at the back here. This covers, like we said, the fall of Roman Britain, so I believe it's 5th century AD, and you've got the majority of what was Britannia back then. This plays up to 4, but it can play any number of players. You don't have to have just 4 people to play it. There's actually a couple of options. If you play with fewer players, you can divvy up the factions, so everyone plays a couple of factions, and you have to win with both factions to win. Or this comes with a full non-player system, which basically it's not just solo AI bots. It's specifically for non-player. It's slightly different, but you can play with 3 players and have 1 non-player, or you can have solo and have 3 non-players. You can kind of do it however you want based on how many players you've got. So that's good. We like that. So let's take a little look in the box. This is a long game, but that's not anything frankly new from the Coin series. Okay. So to start with, we got that artwork on the front again. This is the playbook, and we've also got the rule book here as well. So we've got some nice different artwork here. It's very thematic. We'll start with the rule book and then we'll move on to the playbook. Rules book is 44 pages on the back, and this is a full kind of main game setup, so it's easy. You can just put all these cubes out, and that's kind of what it's going to play like. Again, this is very GMT. You've got a matte paper rule book, but it's color, a lot of dense text. If you've played the Coin series, a lot of these rules will be familiar to you from like a turn-taking standpoint, how the cards work, your operations, and kind of special actions that you'll be doing. However, obviously there's a lot of new stuff, but the bulk of it will be familiar. If this is your first time, this is going to be a lot to digest, and I would recommend picking up the playbook, because this has kind of a walkthrough and example of play, and seeing it and seeing how the mechanics work as you learn them, it'd be a much easier way to pick the game up. So the playbook, which has the scenarios and is over 70 pages long. This is much bigger than the actual rulebook. But again, so this is, they've got like full setup here, and kind of the setup instructions. They literally walk you through step by step how each card works and what it looks like. And this is, you literally would set this up on the board and walk through it as it describes it to teach yourself the mechanics. And that goes on and on and on and on and on. I mean, they go through a full epoch that's 15 pages. You just set it up and it says, move these guys here on their turn. They do that for this reason. Here's what happens as a result. And so that's a very simple way to visually see the game being played and learn what the mechanics mean, because there's a lot of text in there. You've got the non-player rules and kind of orientations, all the things that they're going to do and how they would do it and what that looks like as well. Victory descriptions here based on what happens. You kind of say, oh, during this part, if these people win, this is what happens as a result. That's really neat. I always like that. It just adds a little bit of theme of, it's not just, oh, I won as this faction, yay, I'm a winner. Well, it describes what that would mean for kind of the whole of, you know, Britain going forward and what that would look like. And then the rest of this, so from page 28 onwards, it's just, you've got, this is almost like interviews and descriptions. This is Volko Runke, who designed the Coin system, and then Mark, who designed this volume within the system. Their descriptions and just discussing about all of the mechanics in the game, the history of the game, all the different bits and pieces they put in there and what that looks like. Then in the back here, you've got every single card in the game it's pictured, and it has a description of the background is what that card meant, and then the tip of when or what you might use that for, what that might look like. So again, for the uninitiated, if you're new, these kind of things, and there's tons of that, are just helpful for figuring out, there might be an event here, but you might not know exactly the implications of what that might mean. This is going to tell you how if this is your first time. So really, really glad. GMT does a fantastic job of doing those. Really, really like those. Right here, this is a very small baggie of cards. And we'll just pull these out. I believe these are the Epoch Cards. And these are going to come up. These kind of divide the game into sections. Usually you'll play with anywhere from 2 to 4. And you'll play through a stack of cards and an epoch. So it's a period of extended time, and this is kind of the result of those X amount of years. And you'll go through 4 or 5 of those, and that's when the game ends during the last epoch, so to speak. Here's a couple of player aids. Let's see, we've got 2 of these ones. So these are just full cards. These describe what happens in that epoch round. Because the epoch, when this card comes up, you'll basically have a different sequence of play. You'll kind of take a break from doing all your actions. You'll do a lot of upkeep, a lot of resource, you gain money for the upcoming years. You'll rearrange your troops as they have to go home. A lot of different things. This kind of describes and outlines that, so you've got that handy. Because what you don't want to do is you do a bunch of stuff, and then you have an epoch card, and you're like, I have to undo what I did. You kind of want to work your way to your aims, but then prepare yourself for this epoch so you don't get hosed when you have to take all your troops back that you just paid a lot of money for. On the back of both of these, again identical, you've got the battles, and this is very detailed, but not as detailed as the rules. So you read the rules once, you can get most of it from here, so you don't have to leaf through the rules every time. There's a couple of charts down here about what different strongholds are, and which units go when and what their value is in battle, and then what their home terrains are as well. This is very helpful. You'll want these on hand throughout the game. Even for experienced gamers, you just read through, boop, boop, boop. You'll never not have those around pretty much. Then we have a non-player guidelines summary. Again, if you don't have 2 or 4 players and you're using non-players, this is going to help you do that. You decide different tactics that they do. Would they raid or not, depending on which situation or which stronghold they're looking at. This is almost like a decision type matrix of who does what when. Those will be very helpful for the non-player factions. Okay, so then we have here, there's 4, again these are identical, you get 1 for each player. These are kind of your actions, and this is a bifold, and it has for each faction, and I'm not going to even try and do the names. So you have, these are the two different Britain factions, and they have a list of actions that they can do on their turn, and then based on what happens in the game, there's these special actions that they might be able to do. And you'll usually do one of these and one of these, and it just describes exactly what they can and can't do, as well as victory conditions for each faction. And then each player has access to what everyone else can do, and it helps you just to kind of plan a bit more. So these Saxons and the Scotti, these are the barbarian factions that keep raiding the coasts and things. So these play very differently, but you can see what everyone else can do, and you'll spend a lot of time poring over these. So every player's got one of those. That's what these 3 are. Then we have non-player event instructions. Again, if you have non-players, based on what event it is, this is what they're going to try and do if that event comes up. So that's double-sided because there's, I think, 83 different unique cards in the game that could come up. And then we have these. This is the real kind of decision matrix for the non-players. This is, if this is happening, do this. No, do this. Yes, this. And so you'll go through doing all the things, and this basically goes through everything they can and can't do, and what they would do to have the biggest possibility of securing position, doing different actions, gaining victory points, performing the most opportune actions, so that it's not just a weird AI that kind of bumbles around. I know these are very smart, and I'm excited. I haven't played with these. I've just played Grant has a copy of this, and we played a multiplayer game with just me and him. where we both had 2 factions, which is what we normally do. So I'm excited to play with these because I've heard they are excellent for non-players. Let's see, Pendragon has a single counter sheet. These are the nice thick counters. We'll take a look. They're very typical from a coin game. You've got Britain control, and you have Dutch control here, and then we've got Saxons and Scotti on the other side. We also have, these are kind of your victory markers that are going to go on the victory track around the edge. These are markers for, I think it's events and momentum. These abilities and momentum events, which will perform, they trigger at different times, or they last for a certain amount of time through the game. You've got foederati here, and these are population markers. A lot of the squares on the board have population values that can change based on being ravaged by raiders, things like that. And the back, you've just got kind of some explanations of bits and pieces, or you've got the reverse side for the control markers there as well. Now we come to the board, which is a big old, I think it's 17 by 34. We'll get that out here in just a second. We have decks of cards. Again, we'll get these out here in just a second as well, but you can see from your typical coin, you've got the different factions across the top. These determine who has the option to go first, and then you've got descriptions of which ones benefits which side, all those kind of things as well. We have a bag of dice, and I am going to crack these dice out because you get 3 d8s and 4 d6s, but the d8s are actually d4s. I guess they just chose to do a d8, so it says 1, 2, 3, 4, and if you flip it over, it's also 1, 2, 3, 4. The d6s, I don't know, these are nice theme. You've got dice for each faction, and the d8s I know are used, you chuck these, and this is how many raiders are going to be put out, and these are much more kind of combat based. You gain bonuses from terrain or ambushing, that kind of stuff like that. But those are really neat dice. Always like it when there's custom dice. Bag of bags that you'd expect from GMT, and then the rest, everything else that's in the box. I don't know if you can see this. This is a colossal bag of wooden pieces. I've played a lot of coin games in my time, and they do typically have a lot of wood, but this is the most wood I think I've seen in a coin game before. We'll just pull some of this out because we're going to take a look, because there's some really cool pieces here. There's a lot. So here's kind of a look at the pieces. We'll try and get these in focus here. So like you'd expect, you've got these kind of typical markers which have the embossed silver on them, and each faction has those. These are the best pieces, and I love these. These are kind of your castles, and we'll see those on the board here in a second, and each different faction has those. I'm just dropping them, I picked up too many. I just think those are really cool looking pieces, so you get some kind of curb appeal from your game. This game has gold cubes in it, which I use to track prosperity or plunder. And then here's another unique piece, and we'll get these out here. I'm going to put everything down. So previous coin games had like I think they're hexagonal cylinders, so to speak. And they had one side embossed, and they would go face up or face down as gorillas. Pendragon doesn't have that. It's a very unique coin in that way. It has these kind of triangle-shaped cylinders. Almost look like a little house or a tent, but they stand up. And these are raiders. They're basically weak warbands, but you just chuck dice and you put a ton out, they just land and they smash things up, and then they go back home. They're very good at doing that, hit and run, but if you try to keep them as a stagnant army, they're not nearly as good. But it's possible to convert them to warbands and make kind of normal cube units out of them, but that's much more kind of quite difficult to do. But that's what those would end up looking like. So there's actually no gorillas, so to speak, from like you would prototypically imagine like in other coin games. It's a very different feel you get from these barbarians, but it's still absolutely excellent and very, very thematic. So that's everything that's kind of in the box. It's sort of like just like that. We're going to take a closer look at the map. We'll crack that out, and I'm going to crack out these cards here. So this is the deck of the cards that you'll be using in the game. These are the event cards, and this is not a card-driven game. It's a card kind of assisted game is what they call it. You'll just have a stack of these that's kind of you build based on the scenario. And like we said, this is the faction order. So this card, the black faction has the option to go first. Then the red faction has the option to go or pass, that kind of thing. And then the blue faction. So what you'll do is, depending on how you choose to play, and we play with you have the played one, and then you can see the next one. So that the black faction might go, and then the red faction might think, this event's garbage. But if they pass, the black faction will be ineligible next turn, but the red faction will be able to go again first, so to speak, next time and take advantage of this one. Whereas, as opposed to if they were to go, they'd be ineligible for the next round, so they wouldn't even be able to do this, and the green faction would go first, because both of these would be ineligible. So that's kind of how that works, but you get some really, really fun strategy, and you can get some swings in momentum based on who's going when and where. But there's a ton of these cards, and you'll dish these out. You might remove some based on the smaller scenarios and those things. There's a ton of these, always a blast. The decision making that comes as a result of these. There's also 4 unique cards, 1 for each faction. These are your kind of pivotal events. These are trump cards, so to speak. So you might use this to like overrule that event, and it's a really powerful thing for you. But then there'll be some things in it. Now they can trump some other bits and pieces. This is a neat little extra bit, which are really fun as well. And the last thing we have here is the board, which is a big one. Let me just slide it out the cover here, and we'll get this out for you. It's a big one. All right. Boxes. So it's, as you'd expect, map of Great Britain. Let's see if we can't try and get most of it in here. But yeah, it's divided up into regions. This coin game has different terrain types. They all do, but this one makes more use of it within the combats. Like you get a combat modifier, so to speak. It's not quite like that. You don't get like a DRM or anything. But the combat factors in the terrain much more. Typically, in other coins, the terrain was mostly just a movement hindrance, or you get some other, optional kind of ability. This, I felt like the terrain was much more important, and it affected how I would play the game in a much greater way than in other games. These gold boxes actually replace the support and is it chaos? It's opposition, that's what it is. You'll have support or opposition boxes in regular coin games. In this newest one, you have these gold boxes, which, like we showed earlier, it's for these gold cubes. And these track prosperity of each region. So it's a very different style of game. You're trying to, as the Britons, gain prosperity and develop the wealth of each region so you can get more money to do more things. But doing so makes them greater targets for the raiders, because the raiders will come in, they'll plunder. They literally take those gold prosperity cubes off as they come in and burn everything and smash everything and take all the loot, and will literally take those away. So there's this give and take of how much do I develop because I'm just opening myself up to be raided. That's a really neat economic kind of a. This is not an economic game, so to speak, but it has a slightly different focus that makes you think about things in a different way. And I really liked that. It was very refreshing from a coin game, just to give some different mechanics there. But really, that's it. There's a ton of stuff in this box. It's a beautiful board. The components are off the chart. I really, really enjoyed playing this game because I have played it already. This is my unopened copy. I wanted to show you everything that's in there. You do get your money's worth. This is a big game. It's a long game. I do highly recommend it. But that's everything that's in the box. And thank you very much for watching. I've been Alexander from theplayersaid.com.